Another great advanced feature you want to know about is profiling. And this one goes very, very well with AVC, although they are different. You don't need one for the other, but they work so well together that it's nice to have both. So this is something you define in security, and then down on the left in local policies. And you may remember I had one, for example. So let me create a new one to show you how it's done. It's very simple. Click New, give it a name, click Apply, and you have a policy. Let me create one, for example, for BYODs. Apply, and then you click your policy, and you get back this page. This is where you're going to decide how you're going to target devices that are going to be affected by this policy. So it could be a specific role, like a group name. It could be a specific authentication type. Everybody doing LEAP will have a rule. Everybody doing IPFAS will have a different rule. It can also be a device type, and this is where it's very powerful. So for example, let me say I want to target every Android device in my network. And then I can apply a rule to these devices I target. Again, specifically a VLAN ID. Let's say I want to send them to 31. And I want to give them platinum rule. And I want to give them some rates or something, or a session timeout. You can have a lot of values you can put to these devices once they are being recognized. And of course, you can activate this rule at the bottom at specific active hours. You can even target a specific AVC profile for these people. So your Android would have a different QoS marking than Apple, for example. So you see, it's very, very powerful. You have a lot of feature flexibility in that page. So let's say, for example, I want to affect the test AVC profile to these users. The active hour, be careful, that is when the rule is active, right? It's only in that time slot that you're going to apply this rule to these users. Okay, so that's for Android. I can also target some other devices. For example, let me target the Apple devices. I could create a different rule, right, for the Apple devices if I wanted to. I don't have to put them all in the same policy. But, that's a possibility I have. Target different devices and then apply whatever policy I want. Okay, so I'm targeting 2 devices. I can target more. And you see there is a vast number of types of devices that you can recognize and target. Click Apply. I go back to my SSID. And then I go back to my policy mapping tab, and then I call my policy for BYOD as I do here. And the nice thing is that I can also give it an index, which means that I can call several policies for the same SSID, which means that as my devices are going to connect, I can have them go down this list, and if they are recognized in the first policy, that first policy is going to be applied. But if they are not, then I'm going to look at policy number 2, etc. So you can have up to 16 policies per SSID, which means that you can really refine the policies that you give to different type of devices based on very precisely what devices you have in your network and what kind of fine rule you want to apply to each of them. So you see, it's very, very powerful. All right, click Apply. So this is very powerful, and you see that in the number of devices we recognize, there is hundreds of them. But there may be that you have some new devices coming to the market, a new iPhone or a new Samsung. So what you can do as well is download new OUI updates. The unique organization identifiers that list the MAC addresses that we can recognize. You can download a new type if there is a new MAC address coming, and along with it, you can download a new profile recognition system from Cisco. And that allows you to have the latest, greatest client type without having to wait for a new code controller. So my policy is applied on my SSID. However, if I go back to my monitor page, and if I go down here, I see my clients. But if I look at my client details, and I go all the way to the right, my client type is still unknown. Why is that? Well, because there's still something you need to enable to have this policy work, and that's in advanced again. And on the right, there is this feature which says client profiling. You can choose local client profiling or radius client profiling, and for each of them, you can use DHCP profiling or HTTP profiling. So until you check this box, we're not even trying to recognize clients. So of course the policy may be there, but we're not applying anything because we're not looking at what the clients are. So you need to check these boxes to enable local profiling, and then your policy is going to be valid on the policy mapping tab. Notice 2 things. First, you can do radius client profiling, and that's going to be done in the ICE box, or you can do local client profiling, which will be done at the controller level. Of course, you would use one or the other. If you use ICE for authentication, you might as well use ICE as a profiling tool as well, and you will check the radius client profiling. If you do non-ICE, local EAP or pre-shared key, then you would use local client profiling. But there is no reason to use both, right? You won't do it at the controller level and at ICE level. That's duplication of the same effort. Also, there is DHCP profiling and HTTP profiling. DHCP is basing the recognition on the DHCP request, the way clients ask for an IP address. HTTP profiling is recognizing the user agent information that is in the HTTP request that clients sent. So you enable HTTP profiling only if your SSID is based on web, right? Web authentication. Because if you use a 2.1x, there is no HTTP, so you don't want to check that box. You would use just DHCP. So for guest access, you would use DHCP and HTTP. And for the others, you would use only DHCP. If you were to check DHCP and HTTP for a non-web type of SSID, what might happen is that you might recognize the client one way via DHCP and see, for example, it's an iPhone device. And then you would apply one policy. And then later on, once the client opens a web browser, which could be minutes or hours after, there may be a finer user agent definition that says, oh, it's an iPhone, but it's iPhone 6. And you may have a different policy for iPhone 6s, and then suddenly you would change your policy. So that's not very functional. So this is why you enable both DHCP and HTTP only if you know that your client's going to use HTTP right from the beginning because it's a guest WebAuth type of SSID. If it's not WebAuth, you just enable DHCP. As a side note, if you use .1x and you use Radius on ICE, let me show you what kind of recognition you have on ICE. You will go there, ICE, and then if you go to policy, and here profiling, and you look at the profiles, it's the same as the controller. It has plenty of profiles and actually a lot more available on ICE than on the controller itself. So recognition can be done on either side. ICE offers even more possibilities than the controller, but it depends on what your authentication type is going to be like. Now, if you enable this, and now that I have recognition, if I go to my clients, I should see some client type. And when I go here on the right, here we go. Now you see that my devices are recognized. I see I have one Android and one Apple iPhone on my SSID. So it's nice, if only that, just to recognize what type of devices you have on your SSID. On top of that, of course, you can decide of policies, but just for the identification of what clients you have and where you have them, that feature is very powerful.